How do you teach your dog to make good decisions? If you've been following us for a while, you've probably heard us talk about this before, and you've probably wondered to yourself, okay, that sounds great, but what do you mean? How do you do that, right? So in this video, we're going to answer the following questions. What does this mean? Why is it important? How do you do it? And as a bonus, we're going to give you 3 examples to help illustrate these concepts, help you understand it. So hopefully at the end of this video, I can give you a tool that you can put in your dog training toolbox. All right, so let's get into the video. So what does this mean? Well, the first thing we have to do to understand, how to teach your dog to make good decisions is what is a good decision? So a good decision is when your dog selects a behavior that you as a human find desirable. A bad decision is when your dog selects a behavior that you as a human find undesirable. And the reason why I'm using this language here is for an important reason. When your dog is performing behaviors, everyday behaviors, everything your dog does is a behavior, right? We as humans label the dog's behavior as good or bad. For example, your dog is chewing shoes, bad. Your dog comes when you call them, good. Your dog stays in a down when you tell them to, good. Your dog is polite when people come over, good. Your dog barks and lunges at the dog you pass by on your walk, bad, right? You get the picture, right? We put our dog's behavior in boxes we label it as either good or bad. However, to your dog, the behaviors they're doing are not good or bad, right? The behaviors your dog does, they see it as either reinforcing or punishing. If the behavior is reinforcing, then they continue doing that behavior. And if it's punishing, they stop doing that behavior, right? So you can kind of, you see the difference there, right? And because of this, there can be a mismatch, right? So let me give you an example. Your dog is, let's say your dog is destroying the house, they're eating your shoes, they're barking out the window. Those we would label as bad behaviors, but to your dog, those behaviors are reinforcing. That's why they do them, right? And so you see there's a mismatch there, right? And so the question is, okay, how can we get our dog to make good decisions, and select behaviors that we as humans desire, right? So that's the question. A dog who can make good decisions automatically selects behaviors that you as a human find desirable without prompting them. You don't have to give them a command. You don't have to micromanage them. You don't have to prompt them or tell them at all. They just do it on their own, right? You leave the slice of pizza on the counter and they don't eat it because they make good decisions. You're on a trail. A squirrel runs right in front of your dog. Your dog doesn't chase it because they make good decisions. And so that's what it means for your dog to make good decisions. Hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully you can see the difference there between the behaviors your dog finds reinforcing and the behaviors you find desirable, right? They don't always line up. So why is this important? Well, the first reason it's important is from a safety perspective, right? So at Hamilton Dog Training, we help people take their dogs from untrained to completely off-leash trained. And once they're trained, our clients are doing off-leash things with their dog, right? They're going to the mountains, they're going camping, they're going hiking, they're going to the park, they're walking around the neighborhood, they're walking around the city, right? Whatever it is, they're out doing stuff with their dog. And when you're exploring the world together, when you're living life, your dog is going to encounter a variety of situations, and you might not even be there to directly micromanage them or make a decision for them. And you have to trust that in that moment, your dog will make the right decision, right? Let's say you're on a hike, your dog's out in front of you, squirrel runs right in front of your dog. You've got to trust your dog in that moment not to engage and to ignore that squirrel, right? Because if they don't, there can be a lot of negative consequences as a result of that. Let's say you're in the city, right? Your dog is off leash in a heel. There's dogs around, there's cars around, you're on a road. You have to trust your dog to make good decisions in that moment, or else there can be dangerous consequences, right? So from a safety perspective, especially in the context of off-leash training, this is extremely, extremely important, right? This is, a lot of people think that the most important thing with off-leash training is teaching your dog a recall. And that's not true at all. The most important thing with off-leash training is teaching your dog to make good decisions on their own, right? Because they're going to be encountering a variety of situations out in the world, and you've got to trust them to make good decisions, right? So from a safety perspective, it's extremely important. Now, the next reason why it's important is because it gives your dog a better life. All right, now what do I mean by that? How does it give your dog a better life? Well, one way to view dog training is you are teaching your dog how to coexist peacefully with humans in our human world. You're teaching them how to live productively in our human world, right? And as I mentioned before, your dog has all of these behaviors that they find reinforcing, but we as humans find those as undesirable, right? Destroying your house, extremely undesirable. Barking at strangers who are just walking and minding them, extremely undesirable, right? Barking at and lunging at other dogs, very undesirable, right? They're all of these, chasing squirrels, undesirable, right? They're all of these behaviors that your dog would like to do, but in our human world, these are extremely unproductive for them to perform. And if your dog is constantly making bad decisions, this is going to affect their overall quality of life, right? Because think about it. If your dog is like constantly destroying your house, and every time you go onto the walk, it's a battle, and you're just dragging you down the street, it's a full body workout that you don't know what's going to happen, you don't look forward to it, your dog is reactive towards other dogs, they don't listen to your commands, like you're going to dread living with them and taking them out, and as a result, they're going to go out less, you're not going to look forward to it, which impacts the way you walk them and interact with them. They're performing all of these behavioral problems, so you're going to end up resenting them and possibly not treating them fairly, right? And so there's a whole ripple downstream of negative consequences that can come from a dog who just makes bad decisions, right? And they overall live a worse quality of life than a dog who makes good decisions, right? If you contrast it with a dog who makes good decisions, a dog who impresses you with their decision making, a dog you don't have to micromanage, right? A dog who just makes good decisions on their own, dog who listens when you need them to, dog who doesn't, they just are just very well behaved, they can control themselves. You contrast it with that, it's a completely different thing, right? If your dog is constantly making good decisions, you're going to look forward to taking them out. You're going to enjoy taking them out. You're going to want to take them out more frequently. You're going to want to bring them along with you. You're going to, oh, we're going on that hike, let's bring the dog, right? And they start living a completely different life because you, as a human, can trust them to make good decisions, right? And overall, like if your dog can make good decisions, they are going to live a better life. So that's the second reason why this is important. So how do you do it, right? So the first thing you have to understand is something called the three-term contingency. And if it sounds fancy, it sounds complicated, I promise you, it's very simple once you understand the definitions here, right? So you have three components to the three-term contingency. The first component is the stimulus. The stimulus is the thing that your dog is presented with. The behavior response is how they choose to behave in response to that stimulus. And the reinforcer or the punisher is the thing that happens after the behavior that will determine whether or not they repeat that behavior again, right? So if the behavior was reinforced in some way, it was reinforcing in some way, then they're going to be more likely to repeat that behavior response in response to the stimulus. If this behavior was punishing, well, then they're going to be less likely to repeat this behavior in response to the stimulus, right? And so what we do essentially is we allow the dog freedom to respond, right? Or freedom of response, right? Freedom of response. Freedom of response here in this behavioral response part, right? So freedom of response, what does that look like? Well, when they encounter the stimulus, we don't tell them how to behave. We let them choose how to behave. And then once they've made a choice, then we apply a consequence. And the consequence is either going to be punishing or reinforcing. And we are either going to reinforce that behavior response or we are going to punish that behavior response, all right? Now, if this sounds very confusing to you, let me give you an example. So let's apply this to squirrels to help you understand this example, right? So we have squirrels as the stimulus. What is the dog's behavior response? Well, let's say you're out on a nice peaceful walk, or you thought it was going to be a peaceful walk, and you're out walking your dog, and suddenly a squirrel darts right in front of you, catches you off guard, the leash slips right out of your hand. Your dog is taken off after that squirrel. They're gone. They're booking it, tunnel vision on the squirrel. You're yelling, "No, Fido, come," right? You're chasing after him. Your dog is gone, all right? So in that situation, squirrel, the dog's behavior response was what? To chase, all right? Now that behavior of chasing, as you could imagine, is a very reinforcing behavior for your dog, right? It satisfies the dog on a biological level, right? To chase these small little wildlife, to maybe catch, to maybe even to kill these small wildlife. That could be very, very, very reinforcing to a dog, right? So in this situation, your dog saw the squirrel, they decided to chase, and that behavior led to reinforcement. Okay, so now the loop is closed. All right, so now we can close this contingency. And now, as a result, since this behavior was reinforced, now this behavior is more likely to repeat next time your dog encounters the squirrel, right? See how that works? And now, okay, so your dog chased the squirrel, you finally catch up to them, and you grab your dog's leash, you're yelling at them, you're yanking on the leash, and you're causing all of this chaos. You're yelling at them, right? All of this stuff. This whole scene that you're making falls outside of the contingency. So your dog isn't quite sure why this is happening right now. Why is this happening, right? Why are you yelling at me? Why are you making all this pressure? Why is this happening? It's not clear to your dog because this loop is closed. The squirrel and the chase and the reinforcement already happened. So your dog is already more likely to repeat this behavior again in the future. This whole mess that you're making right now isn't building any clarity for your dog, okay? So that's a mistake a lot of people make right there. Your dog destroys the house and you come home and you start yelling at them. "Why did you do that?" Right? Your dog has no idea why you're yelling at them. It's too unclear. You're way outside of this contingency, right? So now that this loop is closed, your dog is more likely to chase squirrels in the future. Okay, so Miles, my dog is like this. He's done this before in the past. How do I get my dog to stop chasing squirrels? Well, here's how we do it. So the stimulus is the squirrel. Okay, stimulus is the squirrel. Now, next time your dog sees the squirrel, you give your dog what? Freedom of response. All right, you give your dog freedom of response. So when you see the squirrel, you allow them to decide what to do, right? The mistake a lot of people make here is they try to make decisions for the dog. They try to influence the dog's behavior response, right? They try to do things like, okay, I see the squirrel, I need my dog to heel. I need my dog to sit. I need my dog to look at me, right? And they try to influence the behavioral response of the dog. They try to reinforce some alternate behavior, right? You've probably seen, if you have this problem, you've probably seen trainers recommend doing things like, okay, you see the squirrel, you tell the dog to look at you. When the dog looks at you, then you reinforce that behavior, right? Or maybe you've seen other trainers like, okay, we're gonna do obedience, 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 right? When the dog sees a squirrel, we're going to put the dog in a heel and we're going to make sure our recalls are really solid and we're going to rely on our excellent obedience to navigate the squirrel situation, okay? Now, the reason why that doesn't work, the reason why you can't just reinforce an alternate behavior is because if you do that, the dog will learn that, okay, when I see squirrels, I look at you, I get a treat, good. But also, if I see squirrels and I lunge and chase after them, also good, right? And so they think these are two possibilities. Both of these possibilities lead to reinforcement in the dog's mind. And you'll never be able to have a dog that you can just walk off leash away from you. You don't have anything on you. The dog doesn't have any tools on them. And a squirrel runs right in front of them and they don't chase it. You'll never get to that point if you are trying to go this reinforce an alternate behavior route, right? If you want your dog to make good decisions around squirrels and not chase them without you interfering, here's what you do. Your dog encounters a squirrel. You allow them freedom of response. So if your dog was in a heel, release them. If your dog was in a sit, release them. Let them go. Let them make their own decision, okay? And then once they see the squirrel, they are going to make a decision. Let's say your dog has a history of reinforcement with chasing squirrels, so inevitably they chase the squirrel again, all right? So that's okay. You allow them freedom of response and they decide to chase the squirrel. So they chase. Now what you need to do as the handler is you need to apply a consequence to either reinforce or punish that behavior. So if your goal is to eliminate the chasing of squirrels, then you would apply a punisher, right? Then you would apply a punisher to that specific behavior. And then once you do that, then your dog has realized that, okay, in this contingency, right, if you punish the behavior properly, then your dog would realize, okay, squirrel, if I chase the squirrel, then it leads to punishment. Your dog learns this, and then they're like, okay, so next time I see the squirrel, I am much less likely to repeat this behavior, chasing, because that behavior leads to punishment. So I'm less likely to do that. Okay, now it's your chance, next time you see the squirrel, to do the same thing again. So your dog sees the squirrel. Their behavior response, what's the behavior response? Let's say the behavior response here is to not chase. Right? Maybe they're just looking at the squirrel because they remember last time when they chased that squirrel, there was a punishment event. So in this situation, they're looking at the squirrel. They decide not to chase. That show that impulse control. Maybe they look away. Maybe they look up at you. Maybe they just kind of look at the squirrel, right? And they're like, oh, I don't know about that thing anymore, right? I don't know if I want to chase that. I know what that led to last time. So in that situation, you would want to reinforce that behavior of not chasing, right? And so a lot of people like to overcomplicate dog training sometimes. But what we're essentially doing is you're making it good to be good and bad to be bad. It's very simple, right? In the dog's mind, what you're doing to eliminate squirrel chasing is you make the behavior of chasing squirrels punishing, and you make the behavior of not chasing squirrels reinforcing. And your dog isn't stupid. Once they learn that that's how it works and that's what leads to reinforcement, they will select the behavior that leads to reinforcement, right? And that's it. The mistake a lot of people make is they don't actually punish the behavior and so on and all of this stuff, or they don't actually reinforce the proper behavior afterwards, or they don't completely eliminate the chasing and so on and so on and so on, okay? But this isn't a video about how to fix squirrel reactivity. That'll be a future video, okay? But hopefully you can get the picture here. Chasing squirrels, bad. Not chasing squirrels, good. If you can create this picture with your dog in the future, when your dog is out and around and you're allowing them to make decisions and they've proven to you again and again and again that they can make good decisions around squirrels, then your dog can make good decisions, right? And so that's how you fix it with squirrels. That's just how it looks in an example, all right? Another example, dog reactivity. It's a very similar thing, right? You have the stimulus, the other dog. The behavior is to react. This behavior leads to reinforcement, right? If your dog is reactive towards other dogs, they get some degree of reinforcement from that behavior. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that behavior in the first place, right? So your dog's reactivity is reinforcing. So what do you have to do as the handler? Well, you have to make reacting punishing. The behavior of reacting, punishing. It leads to some undesirable outcome for the dog, right? So your dog reacts at other dogs. It leads to some punishment event. It's a punishing thing. And so they are less likely to repeat this behavior again in the future. And then you can fill that hole. Your dog doesn't react and it leads to reinforcement. And so you reinforce that behavior. Right? You can kind of see how that works, right? The mistake, I call it a mistake because I see it as a mistake. The mistake that a lot of people make is they try to reinforce some alternate behavior, or they don't allow the dog freedom of response. They're always trying to make decisions for the dog, right? Your dog is reactive towards other dogs. Okay, Fido, heel, right? Or they're trying, Fido, sit, right? They see the other dog coming. Fido, they try to stand in front of the dog, right? And like try to block the dog's vision. Always trying to make the decisions for the dog. But we do. Your dog is reactive? Okay, great. There's another dog coming? Okay, great. Release the dog. Release. Okay. Okay. Let the dog make a decision. If they were in a heel, release. Okay, make a choice. There's a dog coming. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? Are you going to react? If you react, then we punish that behavior. If you don't react, then we reinforce that behavior. We make it good to be good and bad to be bad. Very simple. Very, very simple. And dogs appreciate this extreme clarity. Dogs appreciate this extreme clarity because dogs are not very complicated. They're not as complicated as people or as trainers, other trainers, might like you to believe, all right? They're very simple when they come to selecting these behaviors. They will always select behaviors that lead to reinforcement, and they will stop performing behaviors that lead to punishment, all right? So as long as you can be clear in this, then you can solve that problem, and then you'll have a dog who can make good decisions around other dogs, right? But this isn't a video on dog reactivity. If you want to see how we apply it to dog reactivity, check out our dog reactivity videos, okay? So the next example I want to give you, and the last one, is obedience, okay? So this is an interesting one because, you know, I've had some people, you know, they come, maybe they've trained with other trainers in the past, and we're doing an evaluation or something like this, and I'm like, okay, so show me what you've got with your sits, with your downs, you know, and so on. And so the dog is obviously super distracted, right? They're like staring at everything. The handler is the last thing they're thinking about. And then they're like, Fido, sit. The dog doesn't pay attention. And so they're trying to get in front of the dog. They're trying to hold the food in front of the dog's nose. They're trying to do all of this stuff. They're trying to get the dog's attention. And we don't do that, right? We don't do that in our training program. If we tell the dog to sit, we say it once, and that's it. If we tell you to sit, I don't care what you do afterward, but if you don't sit, we are going to negatively reinforce the sitting. We're going to make pressure until you sit. If the dog sits, very good. We're going to give you praise, we're going to give you food, and we're going to reinforce that decision, right? Let the dog make a decision. If you give them a command, let them make a choice. Let them make a choice, right? If you tell your dog to come, and they're out, they hear the command, and they're like, nah, and they're just smelling the daisies, and they're going away, and they're going to check something else out, then we're going to make pressure there, right? You heard the command, and you decided not to come. So we are going to make pressure until you come, right? Now, if we say come, and you come immediately, right? You stop exactly what you're doing, and you come to us immediately, then we are going to reinforce that behavior, because that's an excellent choice, right? And so let the dog make their own choices in the obedience. Don't always be begging for your dog's attention, holding the food in front of their face, begging them to sit, begging them to come. I tell you to come, you come. I tell you to sit, you sit. I tell you to down, you down. And that's it, right? So letting your dog make their own decisions in the obedience as well when you give them commands. Now, those are just a few examples to help you hopefully understand the concepts here of letting your dog make their own decisions, teaching them how to make good decisions. Now, for some nuance. The last thing we need to talk about is nuance, the internet's favorite word. So, nuance. This doesn't apply to everything, all right? This concept, teaching your dog to make good decisions, is not something you apply to everything all of the time, all right? This is just a tool that I'm giving you to hopefully you can put this in your dog trainer toolbox, and maybe you can pull it out sometimes in the right situations, in the right context, in the right circumstances, right? And this doesn't apply to everything, right? So don't try to apply this to everything. You know, just to give you an example, if I had a new puppy, I wouldn't expect the puppy to make the same quality of decisions as my adult, fully trained dog. They are different, right? In the same way how you wouldn't expect a 2-year-old to make the same decisions as a 12-year-old or a 22-year-old. They are different. They should make different quality of decisions, right? And you set the bar appropriately. Depending on where your dog is in the training journey, it might be different, right? Always remember to actually don't make the mistake of not teaching your dog these behaviors. So like if you're telling your dog to come and they don't know what that means, you can't just make a consequence right there, right? And just show them the consequences of ignoring the recall if they don't know what that means, right? So be fair, of course. There's nuance. Don't apply this to everything, all right? But this is just a tool that maybe you can apply here and there in the right situations, in the right circumstances, so you can get your dog on track to making good decisions so they can live a safe, healthy, better life, all right? So hopefully this video helps, guys, in terms of teaching your dog to make good decisions.